So tell me about your first scene. What was the first job that you got booked on?
So the first scene that I did, it was for Team Skeet, and the very first one was actually a Halloween-based scene, which was very fun, and lots of props and silliness, which is something that I love. I love incorporating humor into porn, especially. I just think that it's nice to have that levity. And I shot that scene, and then I actually had 3 other scenes booked with Team Skeet that week. And so I wound up doing 4 total scenes in that week-long span. And they were all really great. Like the talent I was using was pretty nice, and the videographer, photographer was really nice. Makeup was really sweet. So it was honestly very easy for me. There are a couple things looking back that I'm like, that probably was something that I should have thought a little bit more about. But what's hard about this industry is, even though I was very prepared, there are things that you just can't know until you're in it. Mm-hmm. And now that I know those things, I look back on it and I'm like, I would have done a couple things differently, but I don't regret it. I had a really good time, and I'm glad to keep going with it.
Can you say what those things are that you would have done differently?
I don't really want to dig into that kind of stuff. I think it's just knowing what standards are in porn. And I was not as aware of what behaviors are acceptable and not acceptable. And now that I was more knowledgeable, I was like, there were some things that happened that aren't as normal as I thought they were. And that's just something that you kind of have to learn. And it's something that if I knew someone who was going into porn, I would make sure I told them, because I wasn't told it.
So along those lines, if there's, someone watching, a girl that's looking to get into porn, what advice would you give them? Is there anything in particular that you think that they should really think about before they get into porn, things that they should look into?
If you're going to get into porn, I think it is really important that you know your boundaries ahead of time. Know what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do. It's really easy to get swept up in things, wrapped up in the entire experience. And it's just good to have a really strong sense of self and sense of boundaries going into this job. And I would say that for any gender. Mm-hmm. You just have to know enough of yourself and be self-possessed enough that you can stand up for yourself, advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. I would say that's a huge part of it. If there's something that you don't like or don't want to do, push back. Mm-hmm. You can do it in a way that's not going to prevent you from getting work, and it will help preserve your mind and your spirit.
I'm actually curious because, I stopped directing 2.5 years ago. And when I, at the end of my directing, I was only shooting for Ailu brands, so Twisties and Brazzers, and they always have talent assistants on set, and they always have boundary checklists. Do all of the brands do the same thing? Do they follow the same guideline, or is it just mixed?
There's usually, I'm trying to think. I think at this point in porn, and again, I've only been in the mainstream for about a year, so I'm not the most knowledgeable person. But I think for the most part, most companies at this point have, at the very least, a check-in that you're doing beforehand. Consent is talked about, things you want to do, don't want to do. And some companies will send you an email afterwards asking about it, because the other hard part is that, especially if you just came or had a really intense experience, you're not necessarily in your full mind. Mm-hmm. And maybe afterwards you realize that there was something that I didn't like, or you've just thought about it more and you're like, this did make me a little uncomfortable and I didn't realize right afterwards. And so some companies will email you afterwards, and that's nice to be able to give feedback where it's not in front of the person that you just performed with or performed for.
Yeah, that's always and I think a lot of times, especially if people don't have a ton of sexual experience when they come into the industry, they may not know what they like and they don't like until they do it.
Absolutely.
And sometimes they don't do it for the first time until they're in a scene. And so it's they learn about themselves during that process.
Yeah, and I definitely think you can learn about yourself in porn, through porn or through any kind of art, really, art or performance. But it does help to have a decent amount of sexual experience before you go into it, so you aren't making those realizations when the stakes are higher.